All right, so for those of you who were with us last week, we started a new series entitled Burn the Ships. And most of you probably kind of have, if you were here last week, kind of a historic reference point as to why we're calling this series what we're calling it. But for those of you who don't, I'm going to not only add a little bit more historic context to this, but hopefully at the same time kind of let you know where we're headed in today and really for the next few weeks. So the year is 1519. If you are doing the quick math, that's 504 years ago. An individual by the name of Hernan Cortez takes a group of sailors and soldiers to the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. Now, what is his goal? Well, his ultimate goal is actually gold. He has heard of the fabled riches of the Aztec Empire, and he wants some of it. In fact, his objective is actually to overthrow the Aztec Empire. Now, what has he got at his disposal? Well, he's got 500 soldiers, he's got 100 sailors, and he's got 11 ships to pull this off. Now, at the time, he also has modern weaponry. Obviously, nothing like what we have today, but compared to the Aztecs, yeah, he's got some firepower. Now, what is he up against? He is up against the Aztec Empire. This is an empire of 5 to 6 million people. This is an empire that has pretty much called the shots in Middle America for the past 600 years. He's up against a ruler who, in just a few words, can summon hundreds of thousands of soldiers at his beck and call, right, to fight for him. So does Cortez really have a chance? Probably not. But there is this hope and this optimism, at least with some of his men. There's another group of his men that realize that this seems to be a hopeless endeavor, and so they try to actually take some of the ships so they can sail it back to the safety of Cuba. Now, he gets wind of this, Cortez gets wind of this mutiny, and he decides that he's going to do something drastic. And so he has all the men come to the shoreline, and he gives this famous order. He turns to them and says, okay, burn the ships. Now, he doesn't burn all the ships. He has 11. He burns 10 of the ships. He leaves one so that he can actually return to the king and queen of Spain with the royal fifth. What is the royal fifth? This is basically 20% of anything that he is able to obtain from the Aztecs. This is a tax, is what this is. But you're still probably doing the math, and you're like, okay, wait, one ship, and it's sailing off with, how's everybody else going to get home? Well, his sailors were thinking the exact same thing. And so he shares with the sailors another famous line. And the line was this: if we get back home, we will do so on their ships. Bold proclamation, bold move, right? And I know some of you don't care anything about history, and so you're just like, boring, right? And others of you, you like history, but you don't like that aspect of history. I mean, the whole colonization and Cortez had just came and conquered this nation. And understand, that is not my point in this series, Burn the Ships. In fact, today, where are we headed? We're talking about this reality that retreat is oftentimes really, really easy when we leave an open option. Retreat is really easy when you leave an open option. You guys have probably experienced this on some level, haven't you? You ever set a goal? You ever set some sort of objective, and then that goal doesn't get realized? And we set, simple goals like, we'll lose 10 to 20 pounds. But if you also leave ice cream still in the freezer and candy bars in the cupboard, retreat is easy, right? Because you left an open option. Maybe you have a goal of getting out of debt, but you keep all your credit cards. Maybe you set a goal: I'm going to wake up early every single morning so I can spend time with God. Meanwhile, you leave your alarm clock right next to your bed and it has this big giant button called snooze. Maybe you have a goal of learning an instrument. I'm finally going to learn how to play the piano. But you don't tell anyone about it, and you don't actually invest in lessons. Or maybe you say, I'm going to make the marriage work. I'm going to make this marriage work. Meanwhile, you are accepting friend requests on Facebook of people that you used to date or you had a romantic interest in at some point in your life. You know where we're going with this, don't you? Like if that's how you set goals, you have failed before you even started. Why? Because retreat is so easy when you leave an open option. If you're serious about learning an instrument, well, you're going to actually tell people about it so they can hold you accountable, and you're probably going to invest in a lesson or two. If you're serious about getting out of debt, what do? You declare, let's burn the credit cards. If you're serious about making sure that you're waking up early so you can spend time with God, You put that alarm clock on the other side of the room, so you're at least forced to get out of bed, and you're that much more likely to actually stay out of bed. You know, if you're serious about making the marriage work, under no circumstances do you say yes to the friend request of that person that you used to date. You don't do it. Why? Because retreat is not just easy when you leave an open option, it's almost unavoidable. And so last week, we talked about how in Scripture, God consistently gives us this order: burn the ships, burn the ships. Burn these things that are not going to allow you to be the person that God has called you to be, that I have called you to be. And so last week, very specifically, we talked about our maps, right? Our directions. We have some directions in life that we're just pretty confident. If we follow our maps, it will get us to the desired destination that we want. Meanwhile, Jesus says, burn it, because it's only when you actually surrender to me, surrender the direction of your life to me, and trust me with the destination, will you actually arrive where you need to go. Today, what we're going to be talking about is burning excuses. So we all have excuses, and we need to burn those to the ground. Now, here's the thing. I don't want to brag, and I don't want to sound like I'm super arrogant up here, but here's the thing. I am like seriously good at making excuses. Like, I can make an excuse faster than probably any of you to do something or not. Excuses just come really easy for me. I think I'm probably not the only one, though, am I? Right? We all can make excuses from time to time. I was reading a study that there was a study done a few years ago that pretty much highlighted that Americans, on average, will come up with 6 excuses every single day to get out of something, to do something. If you're doing, again, the quick math, that's 2,190 excuses every single year. So what are some of the things that we make excuses about? Well, we make excuses not to exercise, not to eat healthy. We make excuses. Some of the common ones are to not do chores and different errands that you know you should be doing. And then there's another common one. It's to get out of social experiences, like weekly social experiences. Now, I'm not saying like any of you would ever use excuses to get out of a weekly social experience, ever. The reason why I wasn't able to go to church was blah, blah, blah. Like, never. Like, you would never, ever do that. Let me give you guys the top 5 excuses, though, that we oftentimes will make. Number 5 on the list is, I'm too forgetful. Some sort of, you shouldn't really trust me because I'm just really forgetful, and it happened again, right? Number 4 on the list, it's too inconvenient. Right? If I didn't have all the stuff going on with my kids and look at this pile of paperwork, it's just going to be too inconvenient. Number 3 on the list, I don't have enough money. If I was rich like you, maybe I'd do something like that, but I'm poor, so can't do it. Number 2, I don't have enough time. You ever guys use that one? I just don't have enough time. If I had more time, I'd be able to do it. Or how about this one? I'm too tired. Now, I'm just saying, from one husband to other husbands, I'm really hoping you husbands have not heard that excuse too often in your life. Just throwing it out there. I just hope you haven't had to deal with that one too much. Okay, anyway, moving on. We make excuses, and some of you may be even thinking to yourself, okay, what's the big deal? Like, if we're all making excuses, if we make 6 different excuses every single day, why is this a ship that you need to burn out of your life? Like, burn it to the ground. Well, here's the reason why. Because every excuse that we make is actually a barrier to the path that maybe God is actually calling us to walk. And every single excuse is a barrier in your path. Let me try to illustrate it this way. So in our lives, if we're constantly saying things like, well, if I had more money, then maybe. If we're saying things like, well, if I had not time to invest in that. If I had actually an opportunity to do something, but it's just going to be super inconvenient. Well, then maybe. But because that's not my reality, I can't. What you end up doing is you end up creating a barrier that actually looks as though it's insurmountable. What you end up doing is you actually find yourself maybe being asked by God, hey, this is an open door. This is an open opportunity. Come through this door. But what do? We put up this barrier that says, I just couldn't. I couldn't do that. I could never walk through that door, that opportunity. And sure enough, like our caution tape, what does caution tape say? You can't go over there. That's like a no-no zone. You can't do that. But is it really a barrier? Is it really a barrier? Like, can I not push through this quite easily? But what you're doing is mentally, you were telling yourself, yeah, I can't make that happen. What we end up doing is we try to pass off our excuses as genuine reasons. And there's a difference between reasons, legitimate reasons, and excuses. You guys know the difference? Let me give you some examples. So there is a reason that I am not making six figures and playing basketball for the NBA. Like, there's a legitimate reason why that is not my reality. But when I was in high school, I had all kinds of excuses for not trying out for the basketball team. So there is a legitimate reason that no one actually comes to me to translate Spanish into English. But you know what? Every single day, I can come up with about 100 excuses why I shouldn't learn a foreign language. No one is coming to me. There's a legitimate reason. There's no one's coming to me to actually, answer questions when it comes to church multiplication. But it probably has something to do with the excuses that I make for not getting involved in church planting. Do you guys see the difference between the legitimate reasons and excuses? See, we usually have no problem seeing the difference in other people's lives, do we? I mean, when you're talking to somebody, maybe you're talking to a friend, and they've got all kinds of excuses. Oh, I can't do that. No, I can never. No, that's just not going to happen. And you hear, and you're like, those aren't reasons. You're just coming up with excuses. I mean, we've all been in the meeting at work. We've all been in the meeting at work where someone's just throwing out, their reasons why certain things happened, and they weren't supposed to happen that way. And they've got all these reasons, and you're just kind of sitting with your arms folded, kind of rolling your eyes going, buddy, dude, that's just an excuse. You're just coming up with excuses because you didn't do what you were supposed to do. There's a big difference between reasons and excuses. And what happens is excuses end up becoming a barrier to the life that God is calling us to. And so what we're going to do is I'm just going to share with you a couple of the challenges having to do with getting past this. And so this is first of two challenges. We're going to do one challenge now, and then we're going to do another one at the end of the message. But I want you guys to get really comfortable with this phrase. And the phrase is, my excuse is. Okay? So how about we say that together? On two. Ready? 1, 2. My excuse is. That was really good. You guys are paying attention. Let's do it one more time just for emphasis. Here we go. 1, 2. My excuse is. So students, next time mom and dad say, hey, what's going on with this grade? You just go and say, oh, mom, dad, my excuse is, and then share your excuse. See how refreshing that would be, mom and dad? Just to hear from your child that they don't really have a legitimate reason why they're not getting an A or a B. It's just an excuse, right? That would be really refreshing. So, spouses, next time your sweet husband asks you, hey, why are you late? Just say, my excuse is, and then share your excuse, because it completely reframes. It reframes how you're approaching it. Hey, it's not actually a barrier. This is something that I need to grow from. This is not a real reason. This is just an excuse that I should actually mature and push through. And so let's just get really comfortable with this phrase, my excuse is. All right. Some of you may be thinking, okay, I'll try that. But what does this actually have to do with the Bible? What does this have to do with church? Why are you talking about excuses? And here's why. Because every single excuse that you make, if you allow it to harbor, if you allow it to dock in your life, actually has the potential of being Lord of your life. Every excuse that you make is going to compete for lordship of your life. Every single one. Why is this? Because excuses actually tell you what you can and cannot do. Excuses will dictate the path that you will either walk with God or not walk with God. Excuses will say, no, you can't have that conversation. Excuses will find some way to wiggle out of maybe sharing your faith, getting involved in that ministry, maybe actually being a little less greedy and a little more generous. Excuses will actually become your master. And you will find yourself coming here on Sundays and singing to King Jesus, but during the week bowing to King Excuse. So what does Jesus have to say about excuses? If you have your Bibles, go ahead and turn to Matthew chapter 8. I'll give you a little bit of context here. So in Matthew chapter 8, there's some individuals who are wanting to follow Jesus. And one of them gives an excuse why it's just probably not a great idea. Let me read to you the excuse that he gives. It's a solid reason. Like it's probably one of the best excuses to give Jesus for maybe not following him, at least at this point in time. Verse 21, he explains it. He says, okay, I want to follow you, Lord. But Lord, first, let me go and bury my father. A couple things you need to know. So this is a really good excuse, right? You want to honor your parents, don't you? So in the first century, you would need to multiply the intensity of wanting to honor a parent by at least 10 compared to how we honor, parents today. This was pretty much a religious duty to honor your father by making sure that you bury them and you bury them with honor. And so this is a really good excuse, but it also makes us think, okay, wait, so he's hanging out with Jesus and he just gets this word that, okay, like your dad just died? It's a little strange. And so it's quite possible, we don't know this for sure, but it's quite possible that his father actually hadn't died yet. It's quite possible that it's more of a, hey, my father's ill. My father is aging. My father is not doing so well health-wise. I can't follow you now because I'm going to need to bury him soon. It could be one of those things. It's also possible that he's referring to second burial. So there was this experience that they had in the first century where you would bury someone twice. And that sounds a little strange, but the first burial is because, well, they don't have formaldehyde, right? They don't have coolers. And so when someone died, it was customary to bury them immediately, maybe even that day. It was one of those very, very expected things. And so the idea is, okay, we're going to bury them immediately, and then we're going to have this long time of mourning that would take even over a year of mourning. And then at the end of that year of mourning, what they would oftentimes do is they would go back into the tomb and they would take the wrapped up remains that have been decayed and they'd put it in what is called an ossuary box. And this was a box that you would then put somewhere in the crevice of that tomb, and this way you could end up burying like up to a dozen people in one tomb. And so maybe what this guy is trying to say is, okay, my dad has died, but that time, that period of mourning isn't over. So when that's finished, when that's done, then I'll follow you, Jesus. And so how is Jesus going to respond to this excuse? It's a really great excuse. Notice verse 22. It says, but Jesus told him, follow me and let the dead bury their own dead. How many of you think that Jesus is being at least slightly insensitive? Any of you kind of feel like maybe this is just kind of rude? Maybe he should have been a little more empathetic here. His dad is either going to die or has died. And I mean, what, really? I mean, this is pretty harsh stuff. Now, some of you are like, I don't really care. You know why? Because it's not your dad. You know why you don't really care? It's because it's not your carefully crafted excuse. But imagine if it was. How would you feel? Jesus is on one side saying, hey, I want you to follow me. Come through this open door. And you say, yeah, but clearly I can't, Jesus. I just told you. Like my father has passed away. I just told you I don't have enough money. I just told you, Jesus, I don't have enough time. Like this is an obvious barrier. Would you be a little upset? Hey, Jesus, I know you want to be Lord of my life, and I told you I trust and surrender my direction and destination to you, but these are clear barriers, right? See, in this moment, Jesus doesn't seem to care what this guy has to say about his excuses, because in Jesus' mind, there is no good excuse to not following him. I told you earlier that I'm really good at making excuses. So there was an excuse I used for years and years and years not to actually walk the path that I sensed God calling me to walk. But rather than me explaining it to you, I thought I'd show it to you. So let's watch. So I hope you were able to see all the different things that were going on. But no kidding, so 3 or 4 years before Shrek 3 came out, that's what this movie is, I was in a youth gathering, and I had a group of students and leaders, and I don't know what I was teaching on. Honestly, I have no idea what it was I was teaching on. But I gave a convincing reason. I don't know what I was teaching on, but I had a reason for explaining the reason why my wife and I will never have kids. And here's the thing. I painted, like this is before the movie came out, I painted a picture, an image that was almost exactly like what you just saw. And the students were laughing, volunteers were cracking up, and then no kidding, like 3 or 4 years, when this movie came out, I had students that went and saw the movie, came back and said, dude, Shrek totally ripped off your story for why you're not having kids. I was like, really? I watched it. I was like, they did. They stole it. This was my reason. My reason for not having kids was, it would just be too much. I don't have the capacity to love and take care of kids the way I should. It's a barrier. It's a barrier. I can't go down that road. Now, what's super crazy is I said it so often and I had so many great excuses that even my wife, who has always wanted kids, actually determined, maybe we won't have kids. Like she went ahead and started sharing that with other people. Here was the problem though. I had actually invited Christ to be Lord of my life. And there was a period where I just sensed that God was saying, hey, John, is it possible that one of your greatest ministries for me will not be actually ministering to other kids, but actually raising up your own children to know and love me with all of their heart? No. Because, see, these are clear reasons. This is a barrier. I can't do that. Sorry. And again, I just sensed that Jesus was saying, hey, you can push through this, Jonathan. Come, follow me. And what's so crazy is the excuses that I made. I got this close to actually missing out on one of the greatest joys of my life. Why? Because excuses, they weren't real reasons. And I think what's at the root of so many of our excuses is the fact that we want to blame what's internal on things that are actually external. Like we look into our heart and we realize, wait, I've got some fear, I've got some insecurity here. We look into our lives and we're like, I'm greedy, I'm selfish. We look into our lives and we're like, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to deal with that. And so instead, what we do is we redirect our attention outwards. We're like, no, that's actually the real reason. It's him, it's that situation. If I only had more time, if I only had more money, if I only. And we blame what's internal on what's external. But again, this close to missing out on my greatest joy, one of my greatest joys in life. And so I want to ask you a question. Is it possible that you are missing out because you've decided to wall yourself in? Is it possible that God is actually ushering you into things that you will completely miss out on because you have walled yourself in with excuses? If you have your Bibles, go ahead and turn to Hebrews chapter 12. In Hebrews chapter 12, we've got the author of Hebrews. He's writing to a church who is coming up with excuses not to follow Jesus. And they've got good excuses because they've hit not just 1 or 2 bumps along the road. They've hit many bumps along the road. And so the author of Hebrews begins to address, hey, this is how you need to run, and this is how you need to follow, and this is how you need to live your life in alignment with Jesus. And so right in the middle of verse 1, he explains how to do this. He says, let us throw off everything that hinders. Think for a moment, maybe in your younger years, when you went on a race, or maybe some of you ran cross country, or you did track. Did you want to wear chainmail, like on that race? Probably not. You wanted the lightest and the most fit shoes, short shorts. Maybe you weren't looking so great in them, but you wanted them because they weren't going to weigh you down. What is he saying? He's saying that your Christian faith, your Christian walk is a marathon. And you've got to throw off the things that hinder. And guess what? Excuses do just that. Excuses will hold you back, so get rid of them. And then he goes on, right? He says, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. Some of you are like, well, okay, I get how excuses will become this barrier along the path that God's calling me to, but you're not trying to tell me that excuses would be a sin. Like, excuses aren't a sin, are they? Let me ask you, is lying a sin? How many of you would say lying's a sin? Just go ahead and put your hand up or like nod your head, okay? It seems like everyone besides John. John's still not convinced that lying is a sin, but everyone else is on it. Yeah, we all know lying's a sin. So in this case, yeah, excuses would be a sin. You know why? Because excuses are lies you tell yourself about yourself. You guys realize that? Like excuses are lies that you tell yourself about yourself. And we see it so easy in other people. I talk to my kids, and we're maybe we're the voice of God trying to help them to mature and to grow and to step out into new positions. And we're like, okay, you need to walk through this door. And they're just like, Dad, but this, and Dad, but that. And I listen to it, it's like, buddy, you are lying to yourself. Everything that you are saying, it's not true about you. It's not true about the situation. You're lying to yourself. But when I'm real honest with myself, I realize I do the exact same thing. He continues, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. What does Jesus do? I just want you to imagine Jesus coming alongside of you and say, okay, if you're going to surrender the direction of your life to me and trust me with the destination, hey, here's what's really, really cool. I've got a race for you to run. And what do we say? But I don't like exercise. I haven't worked out in like 2 years. Like I can't. What? And Jesus is like, okay, yeah, it's going to be tough. It's going to be difficult, but it's going to be sitting on the sidelines every single day. So what are we supposed to do? He says, fix your eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of your faith. What are we going to do? We're going to fix our eyes on Jesus, because when we are in the midst of the tiredness, when we're in the midst of, I don't have a lot of money, when we're in the midst of, yeah, but it just seems so inconvenient, when we're in the midst of that, where do we usually keep our eyes? We keep our eyes on all the excuses why we cannot go through that door. But he's saying, you know what? You need to actually redirect your eyes from all the excuses and direct those to Jesus. Because what has Jesus communicated to us? If I'm for you, if I'm the one calling you, who's going to be against you? Who have I given so that you can be transformed? You can have strength and power in your life. I've given you the Holy Spirit, and he's going to do just that. And so although this seems like a barrier, although this seems like you just can't get through it, you absolutely can. Have you ever noticed that people who make a lot of excuses are typically the ones who rarely make a difference? Why? Because they just continue to bring barriers in their lives. But yet, have you known folks, heard about folks who they've got every excuse not to make a difference, but they are making a huge difference or have made a huge difference? I'll give you some examples. I'm not sure if you're familiar with these names, but Michael Faraday, we've got a picture of Michael. This was a leading scientist of his day. This was back in the 1800s. It's hard to overestimate, actually, the impact that he has made on our lives, particularly when it comes to electricity. So he is the first one, really pioneered the electric engine. This was back in the 1800s. He was the first to ever build an electric generator. This is an individual, though, who has every excuse to have not stepped into that moment in time because he had no formal education. In fact, the only thing that came even remotely close to a formal education was he took a couple of years to be a bookbinder's apprentice. Now, that's what he was going to do for a career. He's going to bind books. Yet he had this curiosity, and he wanted to learn. And he ends up becoming the leading scientist of his day. And at one point, later on in life, he actually explained to people, I don't know why God has actually given me the ability to understand all this stuff, but I'm going to use it for God's glory and humanity's benefit. Maybe you know the name Florence Nightingale. You guys know that name? So Florence is a woman who grew up in a time in Europe where it was just completely male-dominated. Like every field was just dominated by males. And education was actually discouraged. There were no opportunities for women to learn like the way they are able to learn now in our university systems. At the same time, when it came to the medical field, like no women were involved in the medical field. Meanwhile, when the Crimean War broke out, where did she head? She headed to the war, and she began to heal the broken bodies of those men who were affected by the war. And then she came back to London, and she helped found the St. Thomas Hospital, which is actually a precursor to modern-day nursing. She had every excuse, though. What was the excuses that she had? Well, this is a male-dominated field. I'm not even able to get the education that I need for this. On top of that, she was actually from a very wealthy home. She didn't need a job. She didn't need a career. Mom and dad were going to take care of her. But what did she do? She stepped into that moment, and our lives are better for it. And then, of course, we've got individuals like Martin Luther King Jr., someone who experienced racism, prejudice, and violence much of his life, and has every excuse not to have actually stepped into non-violent civil disobedience. But that's what he did, and our world is a little less dark because he did. See, there is a correlation between your excuses and the life that God is calling you to live. There's a relationship between whether or not you're going to hold on to your excuses or step into the life that God has called you to. And so my second challenge for today, first, let's just get comfortable. Let's just own it for what it is. My excuse is, right? Just reframe it. It's not a barrier. It's just an excuse. Second is this. Where is it that God has been calling you? What doors has he been opening to you, but you've just been closing, you've been putting barrier after barrier. Maybe it's in the area of a ministry. Maybe even when we passed out the VBS cards, you're like, no. And you're just like, don't let my wife see it, right? I don't know. Maybe that's an area that God's calling you. I couldn't start that ministry. I couldn't get involved in that ministry. Maybe it's just in spending time with God on a regular basis. You've got every excuse. I don't have the time. I don't have the energy. I can't wake up early to do something like that. I can't stay up later to do something like that. Maybe your excuse is in the area of a relationship that I can't forgive them. I can't think well for them. I can't pray. I know Jesus told me that I'm supposed to love my enemies and pray. I can't do that. I just can't. Maybe God's saying it's just weak excuses. Or maybe it's in the area of giving your life to Christ for the very first time. And not just I'm going to sit there and I'm going to say, yeah, I should probably do that, but an actual, I'm going to stand up. I'm going to stop making excuses. I know I didn't bring my change of clothes, and I know my hair is going to get wet, but I'm going to get baptized today. And I'm going to stop making barriers to actually living out the life that God has called me to live. I don't know exactly what God is calling you to do, but I'm confident that there are definitely some ships that we need to burn, and certainly we need to burn excuses from our lives. I know, some of you are thinking, one of these days, he's going to burn this church down. And it will be an epic story. So it'll be really fantastic. No, I think we're safe. I'll pray with one eye open. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your patience. Father, you know that we are individuals who oftentimes just come up with all kinds of reasons. It's just better not to follow you. Father, would you begin to kick down those barriers? Would you begin just to reveal to us where we're making mistakes? Would you make it really clear? I think sometimes we need to see a little bit more those open doors. And Father, when you present a clear open door for us, no matter what's scary on the other side, no matter what's intimidating on the other side, will we stop making excuses and follow you obediently? I pray this in your Son Jesus' name.